Tiki mugs are cool, there's no doubt, but what might be just as cool, maybe even cooler, is glassware. New glassware, nostalgic glassware, or maybe not, and most importantly, vintage glassware, hard to find glassware. People tend to forget that almost all of the original Don the Beachcomber drinks were served in glassware. Tiki mugs did not exist, and most of them on the menu had their very own glass. There's just this elegance to the look of these cocktails that I love. And my favorite vintage glass of all time from Don the Beachcomber, and also happens to be the glass that serves possibly my favorite Beachcomber drink, that's the Demerara Dry Float. And most of you are probably not going to like this because it is not quote-unquote balanced. But balanced drinks can sometimes be overrated. Not everything needs to be perfectly balanced. Some drinks are better a little bit sweeter, and some drinks are better a little bit, and in this case, a lot more tart. Before we get to the cocktail, or in this case, cocktails, a little more on this glassware. Because while I love the drink, I might be even more obsessed with the glass. Unfortunately, this is not the original color of the glassware used. It would have been clear back when Don the Beachcomber was first serving this drink. I had not come across the name of this glassware anywhere. I was searching and reverse image searching, and I even found on Tiki Central an old catalog page from the West Virginia Glass Company that had the Polynesian line of glassware and pretty much all of the Don the Beachcomber glassware, including the ringed Tumbler Dry Float. Someone was even selling one of these glasses last year, just one, and it was a clear one, on eBay for over $400. But back in the 1930s and the 1940s, Don the Beachcomber was not using the glassware from the West Virginia Glass Company that used his name, the Polynesian line. It was not called the ringed Tumbler Dry Float. That line of glassware made for Don came much later. But what we know as the Demerara Dry Float glass was originally created by Seneca and called the Streamline Tumbler. You can even see the patent for it from 1936. Now, I didn't even want to make this video because I did not want to tell you all this information in case I could find a non-Tiki person selling one of these online. Well, I'm sure someone out there knew this name and the connection to the Dry Float. That connection between the Seneca Streamline and the Dry Float was nowhere for me to find, at least not online. I wanted to keep this to myself, at least maybe for a little bit longer so I could find a glass, but I gave up and settled for these in the amethyst color. The only other listing I have seen, other than the $400 single clear glass, is for cobalt blue. Now, my hope now is that one of you finds the clear glass. Preferably, you find two glasses, and then maybe, just maybe, you can send me one. The Demerara Dry Float recipe first showed up in Beach Bum Berries and Toxica, and it calls for 2.5 ounces of lime juice plus 1 teaspoon of lemon juice, and this is like a standard size cocktail. Smuggler's Cove updates the recipe and knocks it down to just 2 ounces of lime juice, and they still keep in the 1 teaspoon of lemon juice. Then the drink also calls for maraschino liqueur, something I don't love generally, but it's perfect in this drink. I think it's the best use of maraschino liqueur in any cocktail ever, in my opinion, of course. The drink is also made with Demerara rum, and then it's called for an additional float of 151, also Demerara. Beach Bums and Toxic calls for 1/4 ounce, and Smuggler's Cove calls for 3/4 ounces, and altogether the Smuggler's Cove version just has more rum. For the cocktail today, I'm going to follow along with the Smuggler's Cove recipe, but I also want to make the Atomic Grog tribute recipe to the Maikai's Demerara float. Now, the Maikai version from the Atomic Grog is a much more traditional looking cocktail, no maraschino liqueur, and everything else is pared down, including the acidity. For the Smuggler's Cove version, you'll need lime juice, lemon juice, passion fruit syrup, Demerara syrup, maraschino liqueur, a blended aged rum, which I'm using El Dorado 8 for this, and a 151, and it needs to be a Demerara. And for the Atomic Grog's tribute to the Maikai's version, you'll need Angostura bitters, lime juice, passion fruit syrup, a Jamaican rum, and a Demerara rum. So we got the glassware, and I want to keep things traditional, so I'm not serving this on ice. Instead, I'm going to serve both of these on an ice shell. Don't be too discouraged because these are pretty easy once you get the hang of it. There's information out there. I believe there's information in Smuggler's Cove, as well as one of the Beach Bum books on how to do this. But there's also a video from Tim Swanky Glazner that I'll link to in this episode description. I think that was probably the first time I ever saw someone do this. But after you watch that video and what I'll show you today, you might figure out your own techniques and tools to use that make it easier for you. I'm using this electric ice shaver, which seems a little bit overkill and potentially dangerous. I'm not giving this a full-on endorsement, but I've had this one for over a year and it works well. It's about $60, and that's not too much more than a cheap plastic hand crank one for snow cones, and this is just way better. So you'll need an ice shaver, some spoons, and a muddler. Start by shaving the ice, then slowly packing it into the glass. Using the back of the spoon works well here to press the ice into the glass. This glass is a little bit tricky because of the bulb at the bottom, but as I'm putting in more and more ice, I'm compressing it against the walls of the glass and kind of hoping that it starts to rise out of the top of the glass to give that iconic look. Once it looks good, just hop that into the freezer. Now here's another similar vintage glass, but not quite as cool. It's from Libby, and it has that ringed look to it, but the walls are easier to work with. So same thing for this one, just pressing down as I go along, trying not to make these walls too thick, and I'll use this glass to make the Maikai version of the dry float. So all my glassware is in the freezer. It's been in there for over 24 hours now, but you don't even need to wait that long. I'm gonna leave those in the freezer until the very last minute. Now remember, when you're trying to replicate these, ice shells in these glasses, there's not a picture that you're trying to replicate of these historic cocktails. They're all drawings. The best example possible of them are those drawings, and there's probably some artist interpretation there. So you're not gonna nail it exactly, but it's gonna take a little bit of practice. So let's make the Demerara Dry Float, starting with the Smuggler's Cove recipe. Both of these cocktails will be built in a drink mixer, and I'm starting with 2 ounces of lime juice, 1 teaspoon of lemon juice, 1.5 ounces of a passion fruit syrup, 1/4 ounce of Demerara syrup, 1/4 ounce of maraschino liqueur, 1.5 ounces of a blended aged rum, and this should be a rum from Guyana, and I'm using El Dorado 8 here, and I'm using that instead of Hamilton 86. I'll tell you why in just a second. And before I pour this into the ice shell, I'm going to fill up a small glass with our float. So I'm doing about 3/4 of an ounce of Hamilton 151. And this is why I didn't use a Hamilton 86. I wanted to kind of mix it up in the drink using the El Dorado. For the Maikai's version, you're going to start with 2 dashes of Angostura bitters, 3/4 ounces of fresh lime juice, 3/4 ounces of passion fruit syrup, 1.5 ounces of a lightly aged blended Jamaican rum, and I'm using Appleton 8 for this, and this version calls for a lower proof float, so we're using Hamilton 86 as our float for this one. Look at us, we did it. Pulled it off. The Demerara Dry Float, 2 versions, Smuggler's Cove and the Atomic Rocks tribute recipe. So the way these work is you could sip on your Demerara rum that's on the side, or you could float it in there. It's up to you. I kind of suggest, first of all, doing whatever you want. Maybe trying the drink first, and then adding as much or as little of that as you want. Now, the Atomic Grog's version does call to use Hamilton 86 instead of a 151. Now, Jim Hurricane Hayward, he's pulling off of his, visits and knowledge of the Maikai. So going there and having them serve him the drink is a little bit more pared down. I think if you're against the maraschino liqueur, that's going to be the way to go. This glass is bigger than the other one and bigger than most glasses. So I did dump the ice in because I wasn't getting the volume there. But surprisingly, a little behind the scenes here, I usually make the drink, take some video of the drink, and then take pictures. That takes a little bit of time. And the ice shells are still holding up here. They still look good. And the garnish here is just a straw. So let's give these a try now. Let's start with the Smuggler's Cove version, which is pretty much, you know, it's pretty close to that original one that Beach Bum Berry shares. So let's try that. It's like a puckering tartness, but I love that. Maraschino liqueur provides like some aroma when you're bringing the glass to your face, but it's not an overwhelming maraschino liqueur flavor. There's a little bit of nuttiness, a little bit of that floral note. I've never eaten cherry pits. I've never eaten apricot, stone fruit pits, but that to me is kind of what I imagine the taste to be, that sort of nuttiness. It's not like an almond. It's more of like what I think is that pit flavor of a fruit. But right now the drink is leaning like a little bit too tart, maybe a little bit too sweet, and that's what the 151 is for. I think it's the perfect cocktail, and I say that knowing that some of you are going to not like it. If you don't like passion fruit, you're not going to like it. If you don't like tartness, you're not going to like it. With the added 151, the rum comes through. Use more if you feel like it, if you feel like it needs it. For this one, I intentionally used an El Dorado as the base because I knew I was using the Hamilton 151. The Hamilton 151 and the Hamilton 86 are essentially the same rums, just diluted differently. Now, apparently, that can change the flavor of it as you're diluting it. So there's a difference here. It's not like you can just buy the 151 and dilute it yourself, but I didn't want to use the 86 as the base and then the 151 as the float. I wanted a little bit more complexity to this drink, and we're using the 86 for the float over here, so we're gonna get plenty of that. But having a little bit more of aged Demerara rum here, I think helps out for this cocktail. But this is something like any El Dorado, the Hamilton 86 would work well here. They're all gonna make delicious tasting Demerara Dry Floats. All right, let's try the tribute to the Maikai's version. I'm gonna try it first without the float. You know, it's less sweet, it's more rummy. You get more rum flavor because we have less things competing in there, less of the passion fruit, less of the acidity, but it could still probably be bumped up a little bit. So I'm gonna drop in some of the Hamilton 86. You know, there's just something about that extra Jamaican rum note that I think works so well in this. And I think it would, I mean, it's a Demerara float, so you gotta have some Demerara. But I think that Smuggler's Cove version, I think swapping out even the El Dorado there and using a Jamaican rum, I'm not talking a high funk, I'm talking any of the Appleton products, I think would just add something a little bit different and probably a flavor that I would like more. I think the next time I make this cocktail, which will probably be soon, I'm gonna try the Smuggler's Cove version, but using, I don't know, Appleton 8, maybe even Appleton 12. That Maikai version just tastes much more traditional, is the best word I could use. And I think for the masses, I think you're gonna like that one better because it's not nearly as tart. Those strong flavors coming from passion fruit and maraschino are not coming through this. You get some sweetness from the passion fruit, but obviously there's no maraschino. And I don't want to encourage everyone that doesn't have a bottle of maraschino to go out and spend, I don't know, $30, $50, whatever those are, because they're, for most Tiki cocktails, they're not coming in use very often. So there you go, the Demerara Dry Float and the Demerara Float, my favorite Smuggler's Cove cocktail, one of my favorites from Don the Beachcomber. And yeah, I don't know if you're gonna love it, but if you're cool, I think that you will. Now, one more thing, if you stuck around to the end here, I have been collecting some vintage glassware and just some glassware in general. And a lot of times you got to buy these glasswares, you get like 10 or more. I'm going to start occasionally selling some of those on the Make and Drink shop. Right now, it's mainly just my glassware and some pins and coasters, but time to time, I'm going to put some of the glassware on the shop, including the Seneca Streamline and some other things. So I probably won't announce when those are going to be there. They're just going to be there. But if you're watching to the end, now you know I'm probably going to put that on there right now. And I'm not trying to make some extreme profit from it, but it'll help support this channel. And the biggest problem with any shipping, anyone who does this will let you know, it's a shipping cost. Shipping anything is like at least $10. How Amazon does it, we'll never know. They're just screwing you some other way. So it's like $10+ to ship anything. So the prices are there if you want to support this channel and you want to help me get rid of some of this glassware, and maybe you don't want to go find a pack of 12 vintage glassware. You could just get 1 or 2. So I'll be dropping those from time to time. I'll tell the Discord, MakeAndDrink Discord first, then I'll maybe post it on the community tab here on Instagram. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like below. Consider subscribing to the channel. Go check out that Patreon page for more if you want to support this channel even more. And otherwise, I will see you on the next one.